Well, good morning, everybody. We'll get started in just another minute or two. We're going to be talking about mold and termites. We'll just see how many more people want to hop on for this class. All right, we'll start in 60 seconds unless Simon wants to say anything before we get started. All right, I'm just waiting for approval to be able to share my screen so I can start the presentation. Okay, there we go. Excellent. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're going to get started. Today, we're going to be talking about termites for the first section of the class. And then the second section of the class, we're going to be talking about mold and some best practices, how to disclose mold, how to avoid lawsuits when it comes to mold. And my name is Josh Niehaus. I've been with the Elite Group for 11 years. I actually started in the pest control and termite division. And here's some of the things that I learned while I was in that division. Everyone can see what's on my screen here. This is a termite mound, and they're actually can get to be quite big. Some of them 14, 15, 20 feet high, and they house tons and tons of termites. Another interesting fact about these termite mounds is they will actually plant what's called fungal gardens inside these mounds, where the termites will go and they have to have the exact temperature and exact moisture conditions, exact wall thicknesses to be able to create the exact conditions to create certain types of fungus that they will then go and eat and share with the colonies. Now, luckily, this is a type of termite that we do not have in Southern California. There's about 60 different variations of termites, and then we do not have this type of termite that builds this type of colony in Southern California. What's some interesting facts about termites is termites really, they never sleep. Their average lifespan is between 1 and 2 years. And the queen, however, her lifespan is between 30 and 50 years. Termites are very beneficial for the environment. Because of the tunnels and the digging, they actually help aerate and decompose certain elements in the soil. Termites communicate with scents and vibrations. One of the first termite inspections that I went with a guy named Jack, and we went to this property in West Hollywood. It was a mansion, and the lady had initially called. She thought she saw some damage in her house in a closet, and she happened to have a giant room, and it was all shoes, all high heel shoes. And in one section of the closet, she had kept these wooden shoes that were made in Italy. They're very rare. Well, the termites had the infestation was so bad that the termites started to come, and we flipped over some of those shoes, and they were actually starting to eat some of the shoes. So we had to deliver two items of bad news. Number one, hey, you do have termites. The infestation has gone on so long, they actually have eaten some of your high heel shoes, very expensive. Another interesting thing about termites is they are blind, and that's why they rely on pheromones and scents and vibrations, almost like a Morse code to communicate. So sometimes in really bad homes that have a lot of termites in them, you can put your ear to the wall, no joke, and you can hear them vibrating and communicating via these vibrations. The queens in the colony can produce up to 30,000 eggs in one day. They can produce 30,000 termites in one day. That is absolute insanity, how fast these termites can grow just from the queen producing 30,000 termites a day. In the United States, it's estimated that they cause between $5 and $7 billion to properties annually. That's a big number, and it's a lot of damage. And another interesting thing about termites is they actually have the most biomass of any living creature on Earth, even above and beyond humans. They're responsible for 10% of the biomass. So there's so many termites in the world underground that we can't see them, and they take up a large part of our biomass. Termites essentially need only a couple things to survive, just like humans. They're looking for shelter, food, and water. So what's awesome about the houses that we build is they have all three things for them, and that's why they're attracted to them. Some people, we water our lawns, so we've now got moisture, they've got shelter, and if there's any areas in our house that have exposed wood in them, the termites will find them. They're looking for the same things that we are. It's estimated that between 60 and 80% of homes have termites living in them at some point. And what's interesting about the termite industry in Southern California is you actually have to go and obtain a license through the state of California to become a termite inspector. Just as a realtor needs to go and take certain aptitude tests, a termite inspector must go do the same thing. And there's different branches of those tests, and branch 2, branch 3, and variations for pest control and variations for termite. But you do have to become licensed to identify termites and termite damage in a property. Now, the two most popular termites that we see in Southern California are going to be your drywood termites and your subterranean termites. Now, drywood termites are typically going to be found high up in the eaves. They're like higher up. Just think drywood are going to be higher up, and then subterranean, we know they're going to be below the surface. And subterranean termites are a little bit more destructive because their colonies can reproduce a little bit faster than the drywood termites, and their subterranean termites are known to be just a little bit more destructive than their counterpart, the drywood termites. There's also another one that has been very rare in Southern California. It's a Formosan termite, and it's typically a little bit bigger than both of these, and they have more pronounced mandibles, which means they can eat wood faster at a much faster rate, 2 to 3 times what these other termites can eat. But don't worry, it's very rare to find a Formosan termite. They are typically found in other areas across the world. Now, if anybody's seen the movie Ants, it's a pretty good video to reference when you look at the different areas of specialty inside a colony. Now, for termites, there's different categories of termites. So if we see in the top left here, this is a swarmer termite. The typical swarming times are August through November. So now we're entering in right now in the next couple of months, especially after a heavy rain. You might begin to see these swarming around outside lights, maybe flying in the windowsills. You'll see these little winged creatures, and those are your swarmer termites. And their job is to leave the colony and go and expand the colony a little further. The picture in the top right is a worker termite, and their job is to go and get food for the queen and feed everybody, and they go back and they work and they're building the colony and they're bringing back food for the entire colony. Now, the one on the bottom right is a soldier termite, and you kind of notice they've got a more pronounced mandible, some different coloring, and those pincers are designed to take care of ants primarily. Ants are enemy number one for a lot of termites. So a lot of times, if you're bored, you can look up these two coming together and fighting, termites versus ants, and they're fighting because they're fighting for their turf. They're fighting for their ground. And what's interesting about a termite colony is, let's say we do have an ant colony that is trying to take over some of the termite colony, because they both like the underground structures, and the queen will intuitively know from the scents and vibrations and pheromones that are put off by the other termites, okay, we are under attack. So those 30,000 eggs that I produce every day, those 30,000 termites that I produce every day, they are all going to be soldiers. And that is kind of crazy how the colony communicates based on the need of the colony. And then vice versa. If there's more workers now and more soldiers, there's going to be more workers to bring food. And if the colony is ready to spread, she can tell from the pheromones and the vibrations, okay, now we need more swarmers. And then she will start to produce more swarmers based on all the feedback that she's getting from the rest of the colony. Pretty crazy. Another interesting thing about a queen termite is they are pretty big. A queen termite is going to be probably just right about like the size of this mouse. Half the size of this mouse is a queen termite. So they are pretty large because they do have that sac that they produce all the termites in. But the queen termite's pretty big. If you take care of the queen termite, the whole colony is gone. They all take orders from the queen. And same with bees. If you're able to locate a queen bee in the colony and you extract that out of the property and you take that off to another area, every single bee will follow the queen. And the king termites are about half the size of the queen. They are bigger than all the other types of termites, and they typically are winged as well. So here's some examples of drywood termites. Like I said, primarily up in the eaves. Now, to get damage like this, you're probably in the 5 to 10 year range of infestation. Now, the way these termites are entering is when there's a crack in the wood, maybe just from the heat warming it up, or there's between the joists, they're able to find an area where there's no paint. If there's an area where there's no paint, that's the path of least resistance. So the termites tend to go the path of least resistance. So that's why it's important to walk through your property and make sure it's properly sealed and properly painted, because that can help prevent termite damages. Drywood termites can also enter into the vents on the side of the property and actually end up directly in the attic and begin the infestation in there. Typically, it takes around 2 to 3 years to notice an infestation once you have it. And that's why they do recommend an annual termite inspection, just to make sure you're aware of any damages that have occurred. Now, this is another common thing that you will see for subterranean termites, these dirt tubes that are sticking up out of the ground. Now, these dirt tubes, the subterranean termites, because they don't have an exoskeleton, they rely on the moisture in the soil to survive. They use that moisture, and that's why they have to have that dirt tube, and then they go up into the wood, and then they start eating the property from the ground up. Now, the picture on the bottom, extensive termite damage to a main beam. You do not want to see that on a property. Another thing about subterranean termites is they have fast reproduction just due to their underground colony being protected from all the other outside elements. So according to the Structural Pest Control Board in the state of California, if a termite inspector finds one wing inside a property, they are allowed to call for a fumigation. You kind of see in this photo right here, we see some termite wings in this windowsill. This is quite excessive. And this is a condition that a termite inspector they're looking for. They're also looking for wet wood. They're looking for sprinklers that are maybe blowing onto the property, because termites love the wet wood because it's easier to eat. They're also looking for debris under the house if it's on a raised foundation. They're looking for earth to wood contact. If you have wood directly touching the dirt, they're looking for that as well. And then also on the bottom right here, they are looking for, this is called termite frass. It's termite droppings. And this is a kick-out hole. And termites are actually one of the cleanest organisms on the planet when they do bacterial studies and things like that on termites. And they expel all of their waste outside, and this is what you'll see in your property is termite frass. I was actually at a presentation in Costa Mesa, and there used to be this old water tower there, and it was many steps to get to the top of this water tower, and at the top of it was like a boardroom, a circular boardroom. It was pretty cool because you had a 360-degree view of Long Beach, I believe. And when we were doing our meeting, termite droppings kept falling off onto all of our notebooks. Massive termite infestation in there, and it was definitely glad to get out of there with all the creaking that we heard in the wind. But that's what they're looking for. They're looking for these signs and symptoms. Now, in Southern California, we have a pretty interesting phenomenon that has occurred in the termite industry. Now, if we compare termite companies to Northern California, termite companies in Northern California, a lot of them, their minimum charge, let's say if they were going to go do a termite inspection on a condo, would be $295. Some of them are charging $500 just for the termite inspection on a single family residence. Now in Southern California, that's radically different. And what happened 30 years ago is somebody decided, hey, I'm going to offer free termite inspections, because really what termite companies wanted is they wanted to get the work, and that's where they would make their money. Now, the problem with free termite inspections is that it's truly not free to the company. It actually costs them gas, human resource capital, and they also have to pay fees to the state to file reports. So what happens if they start doing, let's say they do 10 free termite inspections, and their closing rate as a sales company on average is around 20% for most termite companies. That means 8 of those jobs, they're not going to get the work on. The other 2 of those jobs, they're going to get the work on. So what do they do when they've not made money on 8 of those jobs? They're going to put the fees where? In the 2, in order to stay in business. Now, I will warn you, there are fraudulent termite companies out there. This is very common, where they are not licensed, and they're pretending to be a company. The beautiful thing about it is you can go to the Structural Pest Control Board.com. Just Google Structural Pest Control Board, and you can do a license lookup by name, and you can verify if that termite company is a valid company. Highly recommend doing that, especially if it's a company that you have not heard of. And in recent times, there's been some companies that have been getting in trouble for never visiting the property. And what I mean by that is some scandalous companies out there, termite companies, where they'll say, hey, I don't even need to visit the property. I'm going to put a fixed figure of $695 on every single inspection. So for example, when a realtor calls up and says, I need a termite inspection on this property address, they would not go out and visit the property. They would just email over an estimate of $695 to the realtor saying, this will bring this property into compliance. The way this company got caught is because they eventually ended up having a house that had $20,000+ worth of damage in it, and they sent an estimate for $695 that they decided to hire that company. Then they realized, oh my gosh, this is way more money than we could fix. And what the good thing about being a licensed state is, as a buyer or as an agent, you can make a complaint against against that company with the Structural Pest Control Board. You can also go to the Structural Pest Control Board and look up past termite inspections that have been done on any potential new listings. That website's a pretty good resource, especially when it comes to termites, and also making sure that companies have guarantees. Most companies, when they do fumigation, for example, will have to put a 1 or 2 year guarantee that is state mandated on the property, saying that the property will be free and clear of termites for one or 2 years, depending on the type of treatment. If, let's say, we take the tent off, company goes back in, and the client finds termites, they have that guarantee where they can go back to the state, or they can approach the company and say, hey, it's been less than a year, we found some new termites, please come take a look at it. And then they can negotiate with the company depending on what needs to be remedied. This is a fumigation. This is the #1 most popular treatment for termite infestations once they've gone beyond being able to do a local treatment. The average cost from our fumigation is between $700 and $2,000. I would say 90% of your termite companies are outsourcing their fumigations. They're just white labeling the fumigation, and there's only a few select companies that are actually doing the fumigation. Now, to me, this is the most underpriced job in real estate, a termite fumigation. These gentlemen are carrying 130 to 200 pound tarps on their back, and you watch them climb a ladder. Now, most people get freaked out just climbing a ladder by themselves. You add a 130 pound tarp to that and watch these guys scale up that ladder like they do every day. It's impressive, but it is one of the most undervalued jobs, in my opinion. Also, to be a termite company, you have to go extensive terrorist training as well. All these chemicals are serious mandated chemicals that need to be locked up and constantly locked up and monitored. The chemical that they put inside to eradicate the termites is called Vicane. That is the corporate name for it. There's another longer chemical name for it that I'm not sure of, but it's called Vicane. It's an odorless, tasteless gas that can permeate through wood. It's like 100% permeability through surfaces. That's why every person has to be out of their property. The good news is this gas will take care of 100% of the termites that are in the property. And there's been several college studies that, yep, this will take care of 100% of the termites inside the home. Now, before they put this tent on the property, they will put another gas in the property, which is called chloropicarin. Now, chloropicarin is a tear gas. Now, the reason they put chloropicarin in there, if there's any pets or people that are left in that property, they will make themselves known once the chloropicarin gas is placed in the property. About 10 years ago, not our company, but another company actually put a tent on a duplex, and they knocked on all the doors. You have to make sure every room is cleared before you're able to put the tent on or put any gas on. Well, apparently they did this, and there was unfortunately, when they put the chloropicarin in the property, they began to hear a window break and some coughing, and they knew that somebody was inside the property. It was actually an intoxicated homeowner who was sleeping under his bed because he got scared when he heard people knocking on his, and he forgot about the fumigation. Kind of a crazy story, but that is exactly why they do things like that, to make sure people are safe and out of the property. After they flush the Vicane gas, about a day and a half to 2 days later, they come and they open flaps up, and they take what's called a canary. Now, this back in the day, it used to be a real canary, but they take this other a calibrated machine that will measure down to the parts per million if the property is safe for entry. The other types of treatment, now the tent will take care of drywood termites, the ones that are high up in there. Subterranean termites are they're able to escape. They're able to go back down to the ground and get some fresh air. So in order to take care of subterranean termites, you can inject the soil with a chemical. A very common one that's used is called Termite. It's once again, an odorless, tasteless, and the termites come across that, they get it on their bodies, and then they go back down to the colony and they share it with the whole colony, and the queen gets it and the colony is wiped out. And once again, there are state mandated guarantees on these types of treatments with the home inspection companies. Another one is heat, not used that common. Anytime you begin to use heat in the property, you start to see TVs and electronics start to warp under the heat. There are some people that do prefer to use this. There's other powders that you can place in the attic, like a borate powder that will help maintain the termite infestation and eradicate them. There's also orange oil. Orange oil was very popular back in the day. And when they started looking at it, however, orange oil is actually very flammable. So you had people injecting a flammable substance into the wood to eradicate the termites, but it was also very flammable. So there's mixed reviews on orange oil. From my experience working in that industry, it's kind of something that we always tried to avoid unless the customer really wanted it. And then we would have to refer them out to somebody. There's also freezing. You can put on really, really cold temperatures and eradicate the termite. And there's also these microwave guns that people can carry around and microwave the walls. Once again, typical side effects. Anytime you do heat or microwaves, it can damage electronics and things of that nature. So one interesting thing, in California alone, we have $1 billion worth of damage. There's approximately 1 to 2 million termite inspections every single year. And 75% of that is driven by the real estate transaction. And another thing to remind everybody of is there's two types of conditions that they're going to point out, Section 1 and Section 2. Section 1 is termite damage and damage from termites that the inspector can see. Section 2 is items that would be conducive to termite damage. Sprinkler water on the wood, loose toilets that are leaking under the foundation and causing moisture on the subfloor where the termites would love to go to that, earth to wood contact, loose debris under the property. These are conditions that can and may lead to termite infestation, whereas Section 1 is termites and termite damage. And those are the two different terms that they typically find in the property. So how can we prevent termites in our house? Keep trees and bushes away from the house. We want to avoid having sprinkler spray in the property. No leaks inside the house. An inspection every single year, making sure our paint is not cracking, making sure we're sealing any cracks that we notice on wood, no earth to wood contact. You can even change your exterior bulbs to a yellow bulb, which helps attract less bugs in general. Okay, so that is the termite portion of the presentation, and we're actually going to hop right into the mold portion. If anybody has any questions about that section, either unmute yourself or you can put a question in the chat. If not, I will be moving right along to the mold presentation right now. Our company does do termite inspections. You can add a termite inspection to any home inspection, so we can conduct them on the same day and time. We do charge a $95 fee for the termite inspection. All right, so now we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about mold. Every realtor's favorite topic. So we're going to go over some examples of mold, explain why mold should not be a deal killer, and talk about some new technologies that is out there. There's a lot of different legislation about mold, and you guys can read on that. But when it comes to renting, I would highly recommend this for realtors as a document if you're working with landlords or investors or people that own property. It's the California Tenant and Landlord Rights PDF. The California Tenant and Landlord Rights PDF. And when you download that PDF, you can search, and you can search for mold in that document. it's a great document. It kind of gives some best practices, especially in California. Now, according to California, there's 2 factors that are affecting livable conditions in California. Number 1 is a mold issue, and number 2 is a meth issue. So if the house has mold in it, or if the house was growing methamphetamine, or methamphetamine was being manufactured, this is stuff that needs to be taken care of by the landlord. And the verbiage that they use, as soon as reasonably possible. Now, in this document, the California tenant landlord writes, it lays out responsibilities of the tenant. It also lays out responsibilities of the homeowner when it comes to mold. For example, one of the remedies for a renter is to use the California's repair and deduct law, where they're able to take 1 month of their rent. If they can show that they put it to fix a mold or moisture issue inside the property, they're allowed to deduct 1 month rent without penalty and not pay rent that month and use that to fix the problem. There are certain steps that they have to go through to get to that point, and that is all in that document. And really the 2 pages that if I was a realtor, I would want to be versed on is page 5 and page 39 of this document, or at least know I can go and look on these things and some of the different court cases that have set precedents for mold and how landlords and tenants can interact. Like they said, as soon as reasonably possible, you must disclose it to the tenant, and it just must be disclosed. And if you're a landlord, it's got to be taken care of as soon as reasonably possible. And that's kind of a very loose definition. But the whole takeaway here, you guys, is it needs to be disclosed. The main part of this whole presentation is you want to disclose mold. And you don't want to, and as a realtor, you never want to use the word mold or mildew. You want to use stain or discoloration. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. There's a lot of misconceptions about mold, and one of the misconceptions is mold and mildew, same thing. They do have a lot of similarities. I've talked to 3 different toxicologists, and the main difference between mold and mildew grows on living plants. It relies on certain proteins and enzymes that are found in living plants to grow. Now, when they told me that, I didn't believe them. These guys are toxicologists, and I go all over online and I see mildew. So when I pressed them with that question, they said, well, here's where all the confusion starts. Something called the Label Law Act, which required a manufacturer only to put 90% of truth on the bottle or accurate information on the bottle, and 10% could be used for advertising and marketing purposes. Now, because mold has such a negative connotation, people are freaked out by it. These companies began to realize that, and they started using the other word that was very close to mold, mildew cleaner. And that's where a lot of this confusion comes from. So online, you'll see people that are referencing, what they're really referencing is surface mold, and they're calling it mildew. And as I talked with that toxicologist, mildew only grows on living plants. Kind of crazy. So a lot of times you will hear realtors, when a stain or a discoloration is pointed out in the property, you'll hear them use, isn't that just mildew? And we want to avoid those words unless we have a lab diagnosis. But this does need to be addressed. It does need to be disclosed. Here's an example. This has definitely got some stains and discoloration on it. And there was actually a refrigerator on the other side of this wall. And when the sellers had moved out, they had ripped when they pulled the refrigerator out, they had ripped the refrigerator line, and it caused a water leak inside the wall. And then a couple days later on the final walkthrough, you walk into this. And mold can grow in less than 24 hours. Mold is already blowing in our environment right now. It's blowing around. We breathe in mold spores every day. So this is the condition that happened here. And just remember, you want to disclose this. You don't want to paint over this. And you also want to keep the real estate agent hat on. So for example, like I said in the past, we'll point it out and they'll say, oh, that's just mildew in the bathroom. I wouldn't worry about it. Well, now you've taken the hat off of realtor and you've put the hat on of licensed toxicologist. And there's no toxicologist in the world that's going to say you can look at something and identify it. And mildew would be 100% wrong because mildew only grows on living plants. So in the transaction, stain, discoloration, or whatever your office policy is, or whatever your broker or manager recommends to handling it. But I could almost assure you they're not going to say use the words mold or mildew, because that's diagnosing something and you don't want to do that. These issues need to be disclosed. In my 10, 11 years in this industry, I've seen 5 brokerages shut down over mold and moisture issues and lawsuits. These are big, big lawsuits just because of the nature of them. One was a $1.2 million house in Los Angeles. And this was an interesting one where the realtor purchased the home. The realtor hired a crew to fix up the home. The realtor listed the home and then double-ended that buyer coming in. The buyer ended up moving in, started having these health effects like I can't breathe, goes to all these specialists, spends a lot of money trying to figure out what's wrong, how come I can't sleep, what's wrong with me. And then the client ended up finally finding a doctor says, you know what, you have penicillium spores in your lungs. I think you have a mold issue in your house. They hire a mold expert. Mold expert comes out to the property. Yeah, you've got penicillium and aspergillus growing underneath your kitchen sink. Well, she says, I've only been in the property for 4 months, 4 months. How is that possible? Well, mold can grow rather quickly, but they started digging further into the problem. They found out there was a main water line leak under the property. The main water line was eroded. It eroded the foundation. They needed to tear out the kitchen. They also needed to rebuild that main water line. $110,000 estimates from contractors. This individual ended up suing the realtor for non-disclosure and got an attorney. The attorney found pure gold on that agent, the agent who double-ended everything, on their Facebook. On her Facebook post, she said, how do I get rid of mold in one of my listings? And this was the 30 days before the property sold. Bingo, we have an allergic diagnosis from this client. We have knowledge that this realtor knew about it before, and guess who ended up winning? The clients ended up winning. And when they go to court, they don't just sue the realtor, they sue everybody. The lawyers will sue everybody. They do what's called a shotgun lawsuit, and they bring everybody into the lawsuit. So when they also brought the contractor who did the work and did the repairs on the property. And when the contractor got there, he says, he produced an email from the realtor where the realtor had said, please just paint over the stains underneath the kitchen sink. And he's like, I don't feel like I should be a part of this lawsuit. I was simply just doing what my client asked me to do and painted over this. That contractor lost their license in the state of California for 10 years because they're significantly trained on this topic. And they were ordered to pay $110,000 of the fine. The realtor had also lost their license in the state of California for 10 years, ordered to pay other $110,000 of that fine. Now, because the realtor didn't pay that fine, who do they go after next? The brokerage. Brokerage has been in business for 10, 12 years, done thousands of transactions. Brokerage doesn't want to pay it because it's a pretty healthy chunk of change. Brokerage shuts down and opens up a year later under a new name. So what you see with a lot of companies when they shut down, not every time, but you see a lot of times, even with termite companies, they'll do this as well. They get a lawsuit, they'll shut their name, they shut down, and they open up in a little while. This is not fun. This is not something that you want to go through. So many people paint over this stuff. Every time I do this class, I have an office or an office manager or a realtor come up and tell me their story of how they ended up in a lawsuit because they didn't disclose it properly. One most recent one is a big lawsuit now. And the agent actually went through and took listing photos on their phone. Okay, they took listing photos on their phone. Boom, boom, boom. They put the listing up, and they actually ended up hiring a professional photographer to go out a little bit later. They put the professional photographer to go a little bit later. Those pictures were still up, and there was a stain in the bathroom. When the professional photographer put his photos up, there was no stain in the bathroom. The sellers in between those two photo sessions had painted over the stain. Now the realtor knew the stain was there because she took photos with her cell phone and forgot to disclose this in the entire transaction. The buyers move in, the stain regrows. They think they knew about it. They find the old photographs online. Now we can prove that everybody knew about it before the transaction. Now we've got a big lawsuit of rebuilding a bathroom, rebuilding a downstairs, rebuilding a floor because the whole property was leaking from a roof leak and bathroom leak. It was bad. You're talking big lawsuits. So at the end of the day, this lawsuit could have been avoided with 5 words. Stains noted under kitchen sink. 5 words, and disclose it. When in doubt, disclose. So just further affirmation to disclose these issues. As we've talked about before, stains noted here, discoloration noted here. As always, you can check them. And if you want to add a little further commentary on this, recommend buyer to further evaluate. Once again, avoid using the words mold and mildew. Now, people are so afraid of the health effects of mold, and people are scared of it. They shouldn't need to be scared of it. Mold is actually very beneficial. It decomposes all the plants. We breathe it all the time. And has anybody drank beer or wine? I know everybody's raising their hand, or at least they've had cheese, yogurt, mushrooms, and penicillin. Penicillin is prescribed to clear our bodies of bacterial infections. There's a large portion of people that are allergic to penicillin, and the doctor's always going to ask, are you allergic? For all the 300,000 different types of mold that there are, everybody's individual body chemistry reacts completely different to each different type. So that's why the EPA and OSHA have not put out these standardized procedures on how to deal with this stuff, is because every individual is different and every individual reacts different to the different types of mold. And another thing that people are so scared of is black mold. They're concerned about black mold. And what's interesting is they should really be concerned about what type of mold it is. Now, when they're really talking about, when they refer to black mold, is what they're referring to is called Stachybotrys. Stachybotrys is a mold that if it's on a wall, it has higher mycotoxins and it's able to produce more mycotoxins than other mold. So see, a mold plant is kind of like a dandelion. And once it gets to a certain stage, it says, I want to grow and I want to spread. And that's what the mold does. It gets to that stage and it says, okay, now we're going to spread out wherever we can go. And actually, we breathe mold. There's mold in my room right now. We're breathing it in. You walk outside, there's mold blowing around. And that's why throughout the year, you'll have different spore counts or pollen counts. And that's why people have allergies, because of these different things that are going on in our environment. So it's very interesting. And overall, you guys, mold is very allergen-like. It is very allergen-like. And the Stachybotrys can be any color. It can be green, pink, white, because mold pulls its pigment from its feeding source, basically whatever it's feeding on. So example, if we're looking at a white wall, that wall is actually black because that wall is absorbing all the black light rays and holding them. And what's reflecting back into our eye is the white rays that are not being absorbed by that wall. So when we have mold that grows through, it's typically a black color because it's pulling from the feeding source, whatever the pigment of the feeding source is. We've seen green, pink, red. We actually had an investor who bought a property in Palm Desert sight unseen, and we went out there. The whole entire property was covered in all these different types of mold. So it doesn't matter the color, it matters the type. And that's why it needs to be tested. So what's interesting, mold is linked to cancer, asthma, leukemia, autism. And you read these college studies, and then another college study comes out and says, no, mold is not linked to rashes, asthma, learning disorders, cancer, or any of those things, because it's all up to the individual person. It's all up to the individual person. Another misconception is you need mold. You need a dark room that doesn't get any air, or that nobody can see, and it can't have any sunlight. And that's actually a misconception as well. You only need 3 things for mold to grow: air, food, and moisture. So since we know that mold spores are already blowing around in our environment, if I throw a glass of water onto the wall, onto the drywall, I have now created a condition that has all 3 conditions for that mold to live: air, food, and moisture. those mold spores that are blowing around, they'll land on that and they'll begin to grow, especially if there's moisture in the property. Now, when we see mold in a property, this is not the real problem. The real problem when we see mold in a property is not the mold growth. It is actually the moisture. Water is meant to be outside of our homes. 90%, I would say 70 to 80% of building sciences and construction is how do we keep water out of our homes? How do we make sure there's no leaks inside the house? How do we make sure the house breathes if there is any moisture to keep the moisture levels correct? Our homes breathe. There's certain vents and certain size vents based on the certain type of house where a house can breathe to maintain a certain level of moisture inside the house. Some conditions that can lead to moisture intrusion: poor grading, sprinklers spraying on the property, leaking water heaters, very common, very hot showers, condensation. Back before the 70s, people were taking hot showers. They'd start having this growth due to the temperature differences. We have hot and cold, that creates condensation. We now have all three conditions for mold to grow: air, food, and moisture. What's interesting is mold will grow in the desert. It grows in Antarctica. Mold grows underwater. A lot of your mosses are considered molds. And it's all due to these temperature differences. Like in the desert, mold will grow because it gets cold at night. Then you have condensation on the sand, and then you could have fungus and mold grow out in the desert. In that direct heat and sunlight, it can be maintained. It's pretty interesting. So back in the 70s, before they realized that they needed to vent the properties, they were having a lot of issues with this. So then they said, let's put windows in the walls. So you start to see in the 70s, there's all these houses that have these windows. And then as time progressed, they said windows aren't enough either, because that is actually helping the cold-hot air differential and causing more condensation. What we need is fans. So then you start seeing properties and fans, and that's kind of where we're at today. And to test your fan, or to test any fan, you get a Kleenex, tear it in half, or a piece of toilet paper, tear it in half, and reach up as high as you can to that fan and turn the fan on, and then let go. And if that toilet paper is sucked up to the fan, you know you've got good suction. Another condition that home inspectors find is they will let that fan exhaust into the attic area. And that's not good, because they're just now putting that fan needs to go all the way outside of the property, because we don't want moisture there as well. Another thing on the attics, it's very common to find mold growth in the attics and in the foundation. These are two areas of the home that are exposed to the outdoor elements. You've got vents. You've also got underground. There's dirt and there's moisture under there. We don't want mold colonizing inside our house and affecting the indoor air quality inside the home. Also, leaking pipes are another big problem that are causing things. If you have high pressure in your property, the high pressure can cause leaking pipes. You can have a licensed plumber install a pressure regulator to make sure your pressure is maintained in your house so you don't have any leaks. Sometimes we truly do test a stain that looks like a stain, and we'll swab it and we'll test it, and it comes back negative. Sometimes you're just seeing dirt or grime or dirt that is, the water's just collected all the dirt and came through on the ceiling, and it's not an active mold growth. There's been so many times that we've tested it. Nope, we're not getting active. We're not getting active in the air. We're not getting active from the swab, which means this truly looks like a bad stain, but it's just the dirt that was collected from whatever leak, and it's all concentrated right here. Just a dirty ring of water. So let's say in that example where I threw water on the wall, and I'm not going to continually throw in water on that wall, but just by me living in the house, by people breathing and living in the house and perspiring, we actually raise the humidity levels inside the house about 25%. Another condition that we find, windows, improperly installed windows, both the seal in the internal window and then the external seal on the window leaking to cause issues. This was an example of an individual that had 2 industrial strength commercial AC units in their property. The wife was from Alaska. He was from Southern California. The wife loved to have a cold property, 60 degrees. Well, that Cold air coming out and meeting the hot California air inside the house began to form moisture. And he was wearing a parka in the house, and he was having allergic symptoms. He ended up being allergic to aspergillus and penicillium. She was not allergic. So he was having asthma-like symptoms. She was not. Two people living in the same house, totally different experiences. He thought it was because of the cold, but it wasn't. It was because he was allergic to that type of moisture. So unfortunately, they had to turn the air conditioner up to stop that air differential. This next one was about a roof leak where water leaked out of the can light. The clients ended up taking their children to the hospital. The hospital said, well, they're having breathing issues. I'm going to recommend installing a humidifier inside your property to help clear up some of the issues with their breathing. And the humidifier, what does it do? It puts moisture inside the air. The moisture inside the air ended up spreading that mold throughout the entire property. Eventually, the parents must have realized that, oh, this must be what's causing the problem, and the humidifier is not helping us, it's hurting us. Another thing is we just see a little speck of it. We had a condo, and we just saw a little tiny speck of it. When they opened up the walls, the whole entire wall cavity was filled. And there's a lawsuit on this exact example as well, where the sellers were moving out of the house because their wife was allergic to mold. They painted the property. Well, the new buyers moved in, and then they ended up having a barbecue with their neighbor. The neighbor come over and said, hey, do you know if they ever took care of that mold issue? That's why they moved out of the property. Well, I don't know. Let's open up the walls. Went to a lawsuit, big money. And the sellers had admitted they painted over the property, the mold stains, with a substance called Kills. It's a very thick primer. And that mold actually ended up growing back inside the wall, and you couldn't really see it, but except for little trace elements of it. Big lawsuit, neighbors talk. This is why it's important to address this stuff. Now, of course, it's hard for agents to know if sellers are telling the truth, but it's still something that you will get drug into. If you know your sellers have painted over something, you need to disclose it and recommend they have an inspection done on the property. Here's a kitchen pantry where this individual cleaned this month after month after month. They cleaned it with bleach because they heard that bleach was an effective treatment for mold. And what they realized is the window was installed improperly, and it was causing a moisture issue inside that wall. The mold kept growing back because they never took care of the true cause of mold, which was the moisture issue. And anytime when we see this in a transaction, we need to bring it back. You can compare this to termites. Hey, we've got we see some termite damage here. That damage is not the problem. The termites are the problem. We got to take care of the termites, and then we can take care of the damage. Same scenario with mold. Hey, it's estimated that 1 out of every 2 homes have mold colonizing it in California. Very common condition. We know that stain, that's not the problem. There's a problem that's behind there, and we need to take care of that. Sometimes we've had clients that say, oh, I don't worry about that. I have that in my house, or I'm this, and I'm not going to make sure it's disclosed, make sure it's on paper. That's the important piece, is making sure it's disclosed. Okay, that's bad roofs. Back in 2009, when everything hit the fan, a lot of people weren't fixing their roofs. So a lot of the houses we inspected during that time, you were having roof leaks, moisture leaks. Nice homes have it too. Patios are installed properly. This one, no drainage, so the house filled up like a pool on the patio. It went down to the foundation. And if you look closely at this picture, it's actually warped in the siding. This one was hot air, cold air, no insulation in one side of the wall of the house that the builder forgot to install about 30 or 40 years ago. We found like a surface mold on this property. They had to put insulation in the wall. Problem solved, problem gone. Brand new houses have this. Lumberyard mold is very common condition. Lumber's out sitting in a pile. It rains. People are installing, they're building houses. Same with termites. You get termites that are in that pile of wood. They go out and they're installing it right into brand new homes. A lot of times I question, like, oh, it's raining out today. I wonder if they're going to let that wood dry out properly before they start putting drywall and things of that nature. Some builders do, some builders don't. Okay. So at the Elite Group, we have several different tools. We can do a swab test. We can do an indoor air quality test. We also have infrared guns where we can look for moisture. This is a cool video where basically Mike is in a brand new condo, and it's in Laguna, somewhere, I think down by the beach area, and it's never been lived in, but because he had that infrared gun, he looked up and he found a giant spot of 100%, 80 to 100% moisture of an upstairs bathtub that was leaking, that was not hooked up properly. That was found during the home inspection. That's when you want to find those things, not after escrow is closed. You want to deal with these things while you're in escrow. Here's a moisture meter, and here's the indoor air quality machine. That actually tests if the mold is in that sporing process. Sometimes we'll see a stain on the wall, and it's not in that dandelion phase where it's ready to spread, but it's on the wall. So a lot of times we'll tell the clients, hey, it's there, but it's not affecting the indoor air quality right now. You can address it. And a lot of times you see like okay, I get it. I understand. Now we can move forward and we could work towards a resolution. So, and here's an example of a lab report that they always take a control sample outside, because we got to test the spore count outside, and we check the spore count in the room. Now, if one's elevated, we know we've got an issue inside the house, because remember, there's spores blowing around everywhere at all different times. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. Bleach was noted as an effective treatment for mold, on non-porous surfaces. Back in the 1970s, the EPA and the OSHA put out statements that bleach was an effective treatment for mold on non-porous surfaces. Everybody heard the first part of that statement and forgot the second part of that statement. This drywall is a porous surface. This is actually in my mom's house. And if you look at the pattern of this, you can see how it was smeared across, because she put bleach on a rag, and actually that bleach grabbed the spores and carried it all across the property. And a couple months later, it grew back. So bleach, if it's a hard surface, bleach will work. You have to get down into the root system, just like a dandelion. If you don't get down to the root system, you're not going to take care of the plant. This is my mom. She tried to clean it with bleach, and there's a whole bunch of other concoctions on there that you can try to clean it with. But if you're going to clean it, you got to get down to the root. And then number two, she had to fix her fan in her bathroom to take care of this problem. Her fan was so weak, it wasn't expelling any of the air. Installed a new fan, cut this out, problem gone, easy, simple, fixed. So basically at the end of the day, we want to notice it. We want to disclose it. We want to have it tested. We got to find the source of the leak, remove and repair the source, and then do a post-test clearance for the clients and say, hey, this was here. Now we have an indoor air quality test saying it's not, and you're good to go. You're good to move forward with the transaction. You can stop at the disclose phase if that's where the clients want to leave it. A lot of times people just want to leave it there. So here's kind of some of the remediation. Here's what they build. A good company is going to build a negative airspace chamber, and they're going to start taking the property apart. They're going to have all these fans venting and cleaning the air and scrubbing the air clean so no mold spores are carried throughout the house. They're going to use fans to dry out. They're going to use dehumidifiers, and they're going to take care of that. That's a good company. Other companies are going to say, oh, it's $500. They're going to come in there with no equipment, no gear. They're going to saw, cut it, rip it out, carry the spores throughout the property, and you don't know if they got it all or if it's been truly fixed. And unfortunately, there are no regulations on the industry just because of the nature of mold not having any typical standard protocol in it. The main takeaway of this whole presentation, disclose it. Do not call it mold or mildew as a realtor unless you have a lab report, but just disclose it. I want to thank you guys so much for your time. I hope the termite presentation and the mold presentation gave you a couple of ahas that will help you out in your field and help you with your job. My name is Josh with the Elite Group. I'll put my info in the chat. If anybody has a question, I am open for that. Just put that down in the chat feature below, or hop on and just ask me the question right now. Thank you guys so much for your time. Okay, looks like I got a thank you. Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it. I'm going to leave my name and number in the chat. If you guys ever have any questions about mold, moisture, there's an expert even above me at our company. His name's Jerry Severia. And then Mike, thank you so much. Mike, thank you for attending. My cell, that's my cell, 909-912-4607. This is my email. And then you guys might also see my counterpart, Ray Gastelum, in your office. He's actually the one that set this meeting up. I also want to thank Holland and Simon for setting this training up today as well. All right, well, if anybody does, looks like people are starting to head out. If you guys do have any questions, you have my cell phone number in the chat. Once again, Josh Niehaus, Elite Group Property Inspections. I'll stay on for another minute and we'll see if we get any questions. If not, make sure to jot my name and number down.